Recording in progress.
Welcome to the Inside Carolina Postgame podcast. Carolina falls to Kentucky 98-69 out in Vegas in a COVID game. Tar Heels did not show up at any point, maybe the last 2 minutes of the first half. We're, of course, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Rate us, review us, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You get a notification that when we do things like this. And like this today is something different. We decided earlier today we were going to do the postgame pod live, like we do on the beat live. Gregory Hall and I were talking during Inside Carolina Live this morning at WCHL Studios, and it worked out well. Carolina lost by 29. We've got so Gregory's a first timer. Sean Moran joins us of Coast to Coast fame. Sorry, Joey and Sherelle, we are stealing him from you guys for a few minutes. Sean, I'll come to you first. We were slacking during this game, the good, the bad, the ugly. Let's sort of do it that way, even in loss. But I think the good we can talk about is Armando Bacot. He appeared to be, and I'll defer to you guys, and I'll give y'all credit. He appeared to be the only Tar Heel that came to play today. Had his struggles against the big man from Kentucky, but certainly the only Tar Heel that looked like he was interested in being out there.
Yeah, definitely agree with that, Tommy. He did have his struggles, and I think that, that's not the first time he struggled against somebody that he can't overpower, but at the same time, he was playing, really the only guy playing at the same energy and intensity level as a Kentucky team. So he finished 8 for 13 from the field, 22 points and 10 rebounds. And, when you're looking at the players, it was really the Kentucky guys and Armando on the same level. And then everybody else was a few notches below in terms of intensity and effort.
Yeah, it was fascinating to watch Shibwe. I'll mess his name up when I've said it a million times. Just when he was out there, when he was able to stay out there, he was just dominant, completely dominant. Even though Carolina held him below his rebound average, Gregory, something that I noticed in this game that I did not notice or that I did not notice today that I noticed against Michigan. When Michigan's big man got his second foul, of course, Calipari got his guy out today, but Carolina went straight at the big man for Michigan to get him off the floor because he was a game changer. He picked up his third, then he picked up his fourth. They never were able to do that with Calipari's guy. It was the difference in the game, really. Or was it? Because Kentucky looked awfully good even without him on the floor.
Yeah, I think UNC had the luxury in that Michigan game where their guards were firing on all cylinders at that point. And this one, when Tshiebwe went out, Armando also kind of came out because he had picked up his second foul. And so then it was just a matter of trying to get everyone else trying to go, and it just wasn't happening. So UNC, I mean, they took a little bit of an advantage with Tshiebwe out. They made that run late in the second half. But it just goes back to the intensity factor here where Kentucky was just the better team for almost the entire 40 minutes. And them being the better team isn't necessarily talking about their level of talent, but talking about how they played the game. Level of talent in this, it didn't matter. And they obviously had more than UNC did today. I mean, Walker had more than his season average at halftime. He was just exposing R.J. Davis on the defensive end. So just when Tshiebwe went out, UNC tried to get their guards going, and they couldn't get it. And that's why there was an 11-point deficit, and then Tshiebwe came back in, and then they ended up losing by 29 because they just couldn't – nobody could do a single thing in this game outside of Bacot. And then when Bacot was actually matched evenly, he couldn't really do anything either.
Sean, we will talk about the bad and the ugly in a minute. But talking about Wheeler, I mean, a lot of people talk about how R.J. Davis is undersized. It hampers him, and it does at times. It did not affect Wheeler at all, being the shortest guy on the court. I mean, he absolutely was dominant out there. He finished with 26, wanted to get his another bucket to get his career high. But not only did he have 26 points himself, he had 8 assists. Just a complete dominant performance by the little guy.
Well, I think that was one of Kentucky's keys going into the game was looking for Wheeler, and they thought if Wheeler could get going, that would open things up for the team. They also knew that there was going to be, in today's age, in the analytical age, the mid-range is frowned upon. But Kentucky knew that they were going to have ample opportunities in the mid-range, and they definitely took advantage, especially Wheeler hitting several early on. And you saw UNC at the very beginning just playing really 5 feet off of him, which obviously packs the paint a little bit, but I think it also takes the edge out of the defense, where you're not maybe mentally as engaged as you are if you're really up guarding the guy. And it also makes it easier for him to kind of put pressure on and attack. And when we're talking about the difference in the game, that I think it was a second or third possession, he picks up RJ. Another one of their focuses was getting up in RJ's grill, and he picked the ball from him for an easy layup. So he was a focus point for Kentucky, and they executed their game plan, and he did put a lot of pressure on UNC on both ends of the floor.
He did. And then right after the pick of RJ comes back and gets the offensive foul. Now, there were a lot of hands going on the entire game, but Kentucky was able to get up in Carolina, I think, across the board. It wasn't just Wheeler on RJ, it was everybody. And if you looked at both ends of the floor, you had Carolina on the defensive end, there was a gap. Unless there was a screen and roll or pick and roll, there was a 4 and 5 foot cushion on everybody. Maybe it's by design, maybe it is. Kentucky was in Carolina's shirts, in those black uniforms the entire night, and they were unable to do anything on the offensive end. We've seen Carolina's defense as bad as it was today, Gregory, earlier in the season. I mean, it was a repeat of what we saw earlier in the season, really ending the defensive effort in the Tennessee game. It changed after that until today. But Carolina's offense, did you see an offensive performance like this coming? They didn't shoot terrible. They shot 44%, 43% from the game, but 1 for 13 from 3. Carolina will not win many ball games at all if they cannot hit 30, 35, 40% of their threes.
Right. Well, the thing that I was looking at, and Sean and I were kind of talking about this before we went live here, was that, they shot abysmal from 3. 1 for 13 is not going to get it done. But even if they had gone 6 for 13, that wasn't going to get it done either. And I wrote after the Elon game, which was their worst offensive shooting performance of the season. Yes, it's Elon, which I think plays a role here. In that game, when the shots weren't falling, they found other ways to manufacture offense and to win the game. They got out in the fast break. They got offensive rebounds and got up on second chance points, and they drove, got fouled, and got to the free throw line. They tried to do things. They understood that what they were doing was not good enough and wasn't going to win them the ball game. So they made they won ugly, right? And after the game, Caleb, Dawson, they're all like, this showed that we can win ugly. Well, today, the shots were not falling early, and they got the ball to Armando. Give them credit for that, but no one else could get to the rim. When they got to the rim, they went up soft and couldn't finish. And they got bullied on the offensive glass. It was an 11-0 deficit in offensive rebounds at one point. I think they finished, 16-5? 17-6. Yep. So you're losing the second chance points battle 15-6. You got outworked in the paint 54-36. So even with Armando having a good game, they're still getting outworked in the paint by 18 points, with Armando having 22. With 6
rebounds
free throws.
And rebounds 44-26. So somebody find me a stat. Greg Barnes, find me a stat when Carolina was out rebounded by 18.
Right. So the shots weren't falling, but they've shown in other games that they understand what to do when that doesn't happen. They didn't do that today. Not one bit.
Somebody in the chat brought up Hubert's remarks after the Tennessee game that said that effort will never happen again.
Yeah.
I'll save that for a few minutes from now. But let's talk about the bad. The good, Baycott, he played well. He brought the intensity. The bad, Sean, is this team just doesn't have athleticism. We knew that. We've talked about that on all these podcasts. But when you couple that without the effort and the drive and the focus and all, it could be as ugly as it can get for North Carolina. And it all manifested itself today. After the Tennessee game, after it would never happen again, Well, that's just not how it works with 18 to 22-year-olds, and here we are talking about a 29-point loss.
Yeah, I think Kentucky, from an athleticism perspective, was able to get into the paint. They're able to attack better, and we talked about it defensively. They're able to get up in everybody, and really, when you're looking at the point guards, they put a little bit of size and length and speed on RJ, and he was rendered pretty much ineffective in the first half. And Love, who had been playing fantastic up until this point, he was struggling, taking a little, almost like last year, taking a little bit more from a difficulty perspective, as well as not being able to get into the paint. And as a result, the guards were 1 for 10. You have Leaky, who's been having a great season, but at the same time, he hasn't been asked to do a lot offensively. And when you have the guard struggling, now it's a little more important to have a 3-man that can help offensively, which wasn't the case. And then from the 4 perspective, they weren't able to take advantage of that. I'd say mismatch offensively. So athletically, Kentucky was just able to dictate the pace, and they were able to dictate what they wanted to do throughout the course of the game.
You talking about a 3-man, and maybe he plays a 2, maybe he just plays a wing, but Kellen Grady looked mighty good too for Kentucky as well. 5 for 7 from 3 points. The Davidson transfer. I think a big thing for this game that folks, when they think of Kentucky, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, this Kentucky team's not just 5 freshmen like it has been the last few years. These guys have experienced, and Calipari saw that. He saw he could not live off the one and done route, so he goes and gets a ton of transfers, and they were able to. They came out ready to play. The schedule changed. They prepared for a different team than Carolina. Just like Carolina prepared for UCLA, but they were able to do that with their experience that these guys brought. Gregory, which brings me to the ugly, and that's the meltdown, the disconnect between what Carolina needs to do to be really good versus what they did. I think the last 2 minutes of the first half, we saw what this team could do, and that was it. Why?
I'm looking at 9 assists on 23 made baskets. And I think that kind of leads to the off-the-ball effort that was not there. You knew your teammates were struggling to get shots fall. So you have to try to produce easy baskets. The way to do that, back cuts, right? Rolling off screens better. Executing off the ball in a way that allows free-flowing ball movement. When we've seen this team at their best, the ball is flowing freely around the perimeter. Someone drives, kicks, right? Those are the highlights that you see, and you're like, okay, this new spacing offense is really working. You can't point out more than maybe 2 plays from this game, maybe not even at all. There was one play, I think Armando took it low, got double teamed, and then dumped it off to Manic, easy bounce pass for 2. That was the easiest bucket all night, and it was probably the only easy bucket that they got in the entire 40 minutes. I'm probably wrong on that, but just going off what I saw.
Leaky had a similar
right.
roll to the rim and got an easy one like that.
But 9 assists on 23 baskets is not good, especially when your jump shots are not falling, right? And if you have 9 assists on 27 baskets, right, and they're shooting much better from 3, you'll be like, okay, the shots went in, still need to work on ball movement. But when you lose by 29 and you're on 9 assists on 23 baskets, you point to the lack of effort moving off the ball. And I haven't even talked about effort on the defensive end yet. That's just the effort on the offensive end when you're trying to get back in the game. So I'm curious to see what Hubert says in his post game, because he did make that statement after the Tennessee game that that would never happen again. We're not even a month. We might be a month. Are we even a month after that? I don't even think we're a month past that where it's happened again. So it'll be interesting to see where they go next and how they can turn it around for App State moving forward. How do you think, Sean, that happens?
Well, I think the one scary thing is that besides App State, the out of conference is done. They played, I'd say, several solid teams, with Michigan being their only victory. And I think at the end of the year, Michigan probably might be on the bubble. I don't think they're a very good team. And when you have losses to Purdue and then blowout losses to Tennessee and Kentucky, they really haven't beat anybody. And, you're going into ACC that is fairly down, which could give them an opportunity to get some wins. But at the same time, when they did play Michigan, they came out very focused defensively. And even though they struggled offensively, that carried over until they were able to get going. But, they're going to have to do that almost every game to have kind of that intensity, because, they're not going to be afforded a lot of slip ups once conference play begins.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, you play like that at Notre Dame, you're going to lose. I mean, this Kentucky team lost to Notre Dame. Wheeler did nothing against Notre Dame. So Kentucky learned that. Sean, the issues that I see, the athleticism is not going to change. It's just not all year. I mean, you can play Dunn and Styles and get some more athletic guys out there, and they got a little bit of run today, but I don't see it changing too much over the course of the season. What is correctable, you would hope, is what we're talking about here: the effort, the intensity, and the being ready to play. And Gregory made a great point. The offensive end is one thing, but when you have it on both ends of the floor, I mean, it goes hand in hand, but it's just a disaster. So put yourself in Hubert Davis's shoes. I mean, like you mentioned, they've played, 4 ranked teams? They've lost to 3 of them. They beat Michigan, like you said. Michigan could be good. I think they're similar to Carolina in that they could be good, but they don't play well when they need to. What's Coach Davis tell this team after this game?
Well, I mean, knowing Coach Davis, obviously he'll be, still being positive in general, but once again, it's another wake up call. I think once again, it was a lack, those are coachable things in terms of focus and intensity. They only won 1 4-minute stanza the whole game. And it was really that second one from, the 16-minute to the 12-minute where they got outscored 8-0. And I think part of that is it's, he says it's still a young team. Some of that is maybe taking a time out and trying to get in the guys early on rather than, letting them play out and it's too late. But what is he going to do? I think one thing I would like to see is just a longer leash on Kerwin. I know he has not really done anything this year. He had a turnover in the first half this game. And I still think with his shooting, this could have been a game where you knew the guards were struggling and you bring him in, get him a few shots, and maybe he gets going and he's kind of that spark plug that is needed. But I still think, he's going to be a guy that they can hopefully lengthen the leash on because he is such a scorer, but at the same time, he seems to be in Hubert's doghouse and is not a contributor this year.
Yeah, DeMarco Dunn played more minutes than Kerwin did. And DeMarco looked solid in his minutes that he was out there, but you can't tell me he produces he has a higher potential for a spark than Kerwin does, regardless of how Kerwin's played. I know Kerwin has not played well so far this season, but still.
It's something we'll watch. I mean, people are talking about the plus minus on the message boards. I'm looking at it here on the stat sheet. It's never going to be good.
I mean,
when it's
Baycott's minus 27 and he put up 22 points.
Yeah. Garcia minus 32, Caleb Love minus 30. Who's got the best one?
Dunn's at 0.
Yeah, DeMarco Dunn in his 9 minutes, he's at 0.
Even.
So that's the best on them. It's unbelievable. Let's wrap this one up. Carolina falls to Kentucky, App State coming up, then Virginia Tech, who's another good team who has not played well. So what's there to accomplish, Gregory? I mean, the lack of whatever we saw there is just inexcusable. That can't happen. I mean, that just cannot happen from a Carolina basketball team. Now we've seen it at least twice against decent teams. I don't think Tennessee or Kentucky are elite. They certainly Carolina made them look elite, and maybe they will be at the end, but Carolina stands at 8-3, not bad record, but with no quality wins going into the ACC play after App State.
I'm worried. Obviously, coming out slow in the first half was an issue, but I'm worried about more figuring out why coming out in the second half was the exact same way that you came out in the first half. Figuring out why that happened, because that shows just no fight. You're down 11, fine. You're down 11, but you're 0-7 from 3. There is potential to come back and win that game. just based off of those facts alone. But then you end up getting doors blown off of you, and you get outplayed by 18 points in the second half after you knew what Kentucky was doing. They were going to Walker. He had a great first half. He had a great second half. Yes, Tshiebwe came back in there. I understand that. But still, that's what I'm looking at and trying to figure out before the next game and next couple of games is why did the second half energy match the first half energy when the first half energy was that bad?
Sean, I'll let you wrap it since you're new to the post-game pod. Carolina Falls, you got to draw something from it. Is it a lesson? Is it a wake-up call? How many wake-up calls do you need? What positive can you possibly pull? And Gregory mentioned the second half. Carolina gave up 58 points in the second half to that Kentucky
I
team.
didn't even realize that.
Yeah, 40 in the first, 58 in the second. Sean, what's a positive? What is a hope? We try to sell hope at times.
Well, I might be the wrong person for that, but in terms of hope, look, I think we were talking about this right before we got on against Elon and Furman. On defense, they were kind of being a little lackadaisical in terms of just trying to get some easy steals for breakout dunks, and I think that came back to bite them when that didn't happen today. So I think it can be a wake up call to once again, focus a little bit more, and I still think they're, offensively, the ball still needs to move better. So I think that can at least allow after App State, there's a week of practice to work on things. I think athletically in the ACC, they should be able to match up with pretty much any team from that standpoint. But, I think they need to take just, a few plays where they did play well. One in mind is when RJ actually, pushed the tempo. Got into the lane, but he didn't force a bad shot. He dribbled it out, but it was able to kind of put pressure on defense, and they're able to get a good shot out of that possession. And I think for them, they need to be the aggressors versus, reacting to what a team is doing on both sides of the ball.
Indeed. And it felt like Carolina panicked across the board when Kentucky started playing really well. And that's something that they got to figure out to be able to settle down. They've got to find a guy that can settle them down. Baycott's not going to do it from the 5 position or from the interior. One of the guards has got to be able to settle the team down, get good shots, not rush shots, and try to get some sort of flow to settle everybody down. Because if the shots aren't falling and the other team's blitzing you out, that's where the leadership on the court comes from, that we'll talk about all year, and we've talked about up until now. Carolina falls by 29 to Kentucky out in Vegas. It's been our first edition of the Postgame Podcast Live. As long as Gregory Hall gets the wheels rolling correctly, this stuff goes off without a hitch. As soon as he flips me the keys, I can't promise anything. Gregory, appreciate it. Sean, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.